Well, hello, APHUG. Because we haven't had enough notes in class, here's some for you to do on your own. I'm going to run you through the whole wonderful world of population pyramids, and then, I don't know, I'm going to see what else I can do here that might run me out for, I'm going to try to hit the brakes no more than 30 minutes. 30 minutes, that's where I'm going to go with this, okay? I know, you're thinking, what? Oh well, is what it is. Hey, this gets just to the heart of what AP is all about. All right, let's get going here. I'll show you this little video. I got this little link right here, but we'll watch that video in class. All right, so bottom line, population pyramid. Sorry guys, it's been a long day of conferences, just a long day in general. So, this is one of those that we had in our vocabulary list. And so this whole age, sex, composition graph, population pyramid is just a lot easier way of talking about it. And we use that term because a lot of times many of these do take on a shape that looks very pyramid shaped, although we will also see that there's plenty of exceptions to that rule. And we use this as one of the basic tools for studying different population groups. Give some examples. What are some of the things that we can kind of break down with a population pyramid? Definitely, we can take a look at comparing birth rates to death rates and seeing where maybe a certain population group may be experiencing more of one of those and or more of another. And then kind of extrapolating the implications of that. What does that mean? What does that tell us about the overall health of that area that population that's being studied, that kind of a thing. Longevity is just a term that refers to how long people live. And typically same thing, when we see a population group that has really long age lifespans, that tells us something about that population group. If that's a population group that's within one country, then that tells us something about that country's standard of living. If we see longevity as a real issue, where people don't live very long, we can also go everywhere from making some assumptions about that to also just having a better understanding of what some of the challenges and what some of the problems might be. When it comes to that, we can also track, economic development, just kind of the basic idea of, when we look at the health of a country when it comes to finance and economics. Do you have a lot of people who are struggling to make ends meet? Do you have, an exploding homeless population or something like that? And we can see some of those displayed on a population pyramid. And just like birth rates and longevity, that kind of data gives us some information about that population group, whether it's tied to a country or a state or a city, because the population pyramids can really be applied to really any of those. It can go regional to continent to, almost any level you want. Where you have population data, you can produce a pyramid. Okay. Matter of fact, you will be producing some pyramids next week. And then, other things that we can throw into the mix there. Evidence, well, you got the whole list. I don't need to read it to you. But any of these kind of major impacts, potential impacts on population, we definitely can see those show up on a population pyramid. All right. Down with you. And okay, so reading a pyramid here, I'm just going to give you kind of the basics of how this works out. So when we look at that vertical axis, and here we go, so we're kind of right up there, kind of up the spine of this pyramid. This is what the reference to cohorts. Each of these little age groups you see down here, from ages 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, each of those age groups that you see going up that vertices, those are all, each of those we call a cohort. Okay. And in population pyramids, you're always going to see some kind of a breakdown. There's not like a general consensus or rule. Ages will sometimes be broken up looking differently than what you see even on my example right here. All right, but the cohorts are those age groupings. And then this is kind of a standard, and this one you can pretty much go with the rule that you're always going to see males represented, and usually in blue. There seems to be some a fairly good standardization of these, and most of them we will work with will be males blue and on the left, and females in red and on the right. Okay, but even if the colors are thrown in it's some other kind of shades just to try to throw us off, still you can generally assume female, male. Okay, and our pyramids a lot of times will have some of that data on there just to make sure and help you kind of keep things straight. And then the value that you have down along the horizontal, the is typically going to be usually like in what you see on this one. We're starting from 0 up to 3 million to 6 million to 9 million to 12 million. And so that's where we can track how many people in that population are of that 0 to 4 age range, and that's where we start looking at how long these bars are and looking for the long bars where they bulge out. And that's where we really start to do the analysis work with these population pyramids. Why does it shrink in some areas and then pop back out in others? And then why do we see that that sharp shrinkage and kind of gradual or not so gradual decline where those numbers keep getting smaller? Which as you look at those age groups, I think we can probably figure that one out. So anyhow, that kind of gives you the basics there. As I mentioned to you before, as far as the scale of these things, it can be all over the place. I've seen population pyramids that do go out as much as a continent size. Some of them a lot of them will break down by country. We'll look at a number of them that break down by country, but that's not the only way. You're looking at one that is for Salt Lake City. So just one specific city in the state of Utah, and so cities, states, regions, it really can go pretty much anywhere that can be represented by a population pyramid. Okay, and then when it comes to I'll show you just kind of a few basics here. Okay, I mean we're going to look at a lot of variations together in class, but I think we already had this show up on the Kahoot. And that is that when you see a population pyramid where it's got that wide base and then it tapers up, okay? You've got that kind of a thing up toward the top. That's what he said, got a thing up to the top. That's when we're looking at a population pyramid that is displaying a growing population, right? And we can easily determine that because that wide base means there are a lot of babies being born. And that you've got a considerably younger population in that country, on average, and that would represent that the future, is aiming towards a future of growth with all of those, especially if we're looking at a region or a country that has relatively stable healthcare systems, and that we know that most of these babies being born are going to survive as they go through childhood. Okay, so that is one general rule. And then when you see a population pyramid that looks like this, where you're thinking that doesn't look so much like a pyramid, it kind of looks more like a arrow tip or something. Actually, some demographers will tell you that, hey, that's actually a pretty good sign. When you see a little bit more of that uniformity going up toward the top, and then again, as people are aging out, you're almost always going to see it getting a little pointy there at the top, but that is showing a far more stable pattern of population growth. Okay, when we compare these two, and we're saying, okay, what are going to be the strengths and what are going to be the weaknesses of each of these, and it's pretty easy to jump on this one and say, well, man, that's going to put a massive strain on pedia care, I mean basically taking care of babies and young children, and then the school system as they get a little bit older, that's going to really strain a system where here it might be far more manageable because we don't have any one age group where it's just so far out of control, because when we look at these with this really wide base, as that age group gets older, it's going to create this bulge that's going to work all the way through the different age cohorts. And each of those bulges is going to represent a different kind of a strain, whether it's going to be, again, from doctors and, maybe daycares to, the school system, the K through 12 school system, eventually maybe to universities. Eventually it could result in a labor overstock where there's too many people and not enough jobs. The ramifications can be pretty extreme when you have that kind of a setup, where here, things are a little bit more manageable and a more, I just go back to what I put in there, stable pattern. All right. Okay, some other aspects that we can look at when we are studying our population pyramids. Impacts of war. We definitely see this. What you're looking at is a pyramid, population pyramid here of Russia from 2009. And especially when you look up at the top here is where I want you to focus, because what you're looking up there at the top is really the impact of World War II. Okay, Soviet Union, Russia back there in the old days, Soviet Union lost more people during World War II than any other single nation involved in the war. Upwards of 27 million men, women, children, because it wasn't just soldiers that died in the war. If you want to know the answers to that, stick around for AP World History next year. We'll get into it. But you can see the impact of war at the top of that population pyramid. These are the people, these cohorts up here, are these older folks who were still alive back during World War II days. And what you see is far more women than men. The Russians did make use of both men and women in combat roles in World War II, but many, many more males. And it shows there that, how many of those males ended up not surviving World War II. And that's a pretty graphic display there. It's also a pretty graphic display of a baby boom that you see that happens after World War II, where you see that big explosion in growth once the war is over and surviving men go back home and start getting back to families and all that sort of thing. Okay. And we talk about males 18 to 40 and we kind of figure that out that, that's where they would have been by 2009. And those are most of your males that were of military, military service age. Okay. Fewer childbirths, we talked about this as far as just one of our kind of definition terms. But whenever you see any kind of an impact, and war does that, men are off in the front serving, and so they're away from women, and so there's going to be fewer children because of that. And then if you have a country that is under direct attack, where that is being directly impacted by a war. I mean, think about what's going on in Ukraine right now. You're going to see usually typically a sharp drop in childbirths because people are everything from too concerned with basic survival to uncertain about the future and being far more reluctant to want to bring a child into the world where they don't know what the future holds. And so warfare usually also has that impact as well. Okay. And you can kind of see that show up on that pyramid, that little indent right there is showing that, that concern about where are we going with this. But then, the Soviet Union, part of the Allies in World War II, they win. And so there goes the kaboom right there. Alrighty. Baby booms, again, can I please point that out to you? Busts and echoes. All right. So, oops, sorry. There we go. We talk about baby booms as we pointed out in our definition. While what happens after World War II is one of the best examples that we have in recent history of a baby boom, really the term itself just describes that increase in birth rate after a major occurrence like a war. And sometimes also is going to be a result of a period in any kind of population group where they experience, a stable period with a lot of financial abundance, where the majority of your population is doing well. And so here in the United States and a lot of other parts of the world as well, the classic baby boomers are that generation that goes from 1946 to 1965. Really bothers me. This used to be earlier. They changed it a few years ago, and that mainly bothers me because I always kind of considered myself for the longest time to be a member of Generation X, but with them bumping it up to 1965, that means now I'm a baby boomer. It doesn't seem right because I was born a long time after World War II. But, when it comes to these kind of stats, sometimes the numbers, they go long. All right. Anyhow, you see, like I said, you see that baby boom that happens in Russia, Soviet Union after World War II. Baby bust. That would be this. See this little indent right here? Here's your baby bust. Okay, because that's while all these baby boomers are growing up and are moving on towards, from being kids to young adults to boom, childbearing age. And then what comes after that is an echo. And what are we looking at right here? A pretty big size echo, okay? Because not only does it coincide with, its connection to that original boom, but it's also going to coincide with the time where Russia, the Soviet Union, was experiencing not necessarily abundance. Again, if you want to know the story behind that, take AP World History, but at least experiencing a period of time of some political stability. And so it produces a pretty healthy echo in their history, and we see the same happen in the late 1960s into the 1970s. That Gen X generation is an echo in the United States, followed by the millennial echo, and now the Gen Z echo. These are all echoes, okay, that all emanate from a large boom. All right, anomalies in population pyramids. When we talk about that term anomaly, it means real kind of strange, out of the norm kind of circumstances that can result in some craziness from time to time in population pyramids. Talk to you about some of the classic examples. First of all, when we see long bars that kind of show up, especially when they kind of are, it's like you've got a fairly steady shape moving along, and then all of a sudden, boom, there are these longer bars starting to pop out, whether it's male, female. A lot of times that is going to have some implications. If you're looking at comparing cities, and you see one city that does have those longer bars in, say, an 18 to 25-year-old age cohort, there's a good likelihood that it has to do with what that city is known for. Is that a city that houses maybe like a big state university, or maybe a number of small private universities? Is it a city that has, maybe sitting right outside of its borders, a huge military base? And usually, when you're talking about college towns, when you're talking about towns that do house a lot of military, that's the age group you're going to really see bunching up and clustering in those areas. So you're going to see longer bars in those cohorts. Okay, so when you see those sticking out, that's the first thing your brain's going to start thinking is, what is going on there that would be attracting all of these people in that age cohort, whether it's that age or even younger or even older? You start thinking about, what are the factors that make certain age groups want to cluster together in one area. Okay, same thing. We see those longer bars in that older age cohorts, and that is going to usually mean that whatever population you are studying, for some reason, those are people who are choosing to have fewer children. They are the bulge in the population because there aren't as many kids being born. And that might be because of bad economics and people uncertainty about the future. It could be that there are health issues impacting that population group. Or, when we talk about antinatalist policies where the government is trying to slow down growth, that can come into play there as well. Okay, and then if we see those longer bars in the 65 and older age cohorts, then we can assume from there, hey, a lot of people who are done with their working years, they are retired. There's fewer jobs available, and the jobs that probably are available are very service oriented because there are going to be jobs that are connected to taking care of retirees. Some of those are going to be in health, in medical, and some of those are going to be in service areas like restaurants and stores that those retiree services that they're going to be making use of. Okay. Sometimes you'll also see longer bars that are going to go out in one gender but not another. And one of the examples that I'll point out for you in D, and this is maybe more so in some parts of the world than here in the United States, because I don't know, when we think about traditional men jobs and traditional women jobs here in the United States, that really has made a major change in the last 30 to 50 years here in the US, where you're just as likely to see, I don't know, a woman decide to become an electrician here in the United States as much as a man would. Where if you go 50 years ago, a woman saying, "Oh yeah, I want to become a journeyman electrician," people would have been looking like, everything okay? There's still parts of the world that are like that have much more highly defined roles for men and women. what we think of those traditional jobs, labor intensive jobs. Well, that's what men do, and then jobs that maybe are more clerical or in the office. Well, that's what women do. Just, same way that, your male teacher talking to you here. If I go back 7,500 years ago, my career area in education was hugely dominated by women. But that has changed nowadays. So, you still see those bulges and those longer bars in some places, and it's a reflection of that, okay, of what are considered to be jobs that are proper for men versus jobs that are proper for women. All right, dependency ratio. And this is just getting we're just going to talk about some kind of almost like straight up definitional kind of stuff that we had in our list and that you're going to be quizzing over. And again, all of it has some connection to our population pyramids, because it's studying those cohorts and looking at these age groupings. And so again, I'm not going to sit and beat this to death, because this really gets into a lot of what is on our vocabulary list. So the idea of a dependency ratio, again, working, non-working, what we call the potential workforce, what we call the dependent population. It's just different ways that we categorize those cohorts, different ways that we view these age groups, and the challenges and the strains that they can put on an overall population group. If your dependency ratio is out of whack, and it's something that we worry about here in the United States, is that already we're in a situation that because our baby boom from World War II are now in their 70s, in their 80s, in their 60s, that we're facing a situation that some fear where we're going to have more retired people, like 2 retired people for every working person. And economically, how does that work out? Economically, that presents a lot of really troubling challenges. And so, that's why we study this kind of thing, is so that we know it's coming. We know to prepare for it, in terms of our government and our workforces, to try to deal with those kinds of challenges. That's where those kinds of stats, dependency ratios and potential workforce stats and, dependent population stats become very, very important to countries to consider and to plan for. C there is just kind of getting into this whole idea of again, how do we calculate some of this? And so, workforce divided by dependence, that's what gives us our dependent ratio, okay? Just in case you want to know how that all works. All right, I'm not going to get too far into this, but moving into part 2 of our look at population. I'm going to roll through this, see if I can get through a couple more slides here as we kind of grind our way down to. We still have a lot of work on migration even to still touch on in this unit. So, yeah. All right. So, when we talk about population growth, and particularly rapid population growth, and we're going to look at the last couple of centuries, the 19th, 20th, and right on here into the early 21st century. And so, what are the consequences? What happens when we see rapid population growth? When we get into our unit on industrialization, when we get into our unit on urbanization and agriculture, we're going to talk about and learn a lot about the reasons why the greatest growth in human population from the beginning of mankind, going all the way back, has been since about the year 1800. Okay, when we track population growth from the beginning of time, it kind of trundles along very slowly, and then we get to about 1800, and it explodes, and it hasn't stopped growing since then. Hans Rosling talked a bit about this in the Don't Panic video, and he showed you some of those fancy little projection graphs of his. That were showing just how world population changed so dramatically. Well, there's going to be all kinds of challenges that are connected with all of this, and so this is where we get into having to track some of these stats, okay? And the way that we track this population growth so that we can plan for it, so that we can deal with those consequences, one of those is keeping track of the crude birth rate. And there's your definition of it. It's one that you've probably been working on trying to memorize. Okay. And yeah, it's kind of it's quite a bit to take in there. So yes, per year for each 1,000 people. And so that's how they kind of break it down. And then they determine, those crude birth rates by region, by country. And it's another one of those measures we use in terms of health and health challenges, those kinds of things. Okay. Same with total fertility rate. And again, talking about this concept here, average number of children per woman in that childbearing age group that you see there, that cohort from 15 to 49. And I know for a lot of us, we look at that 15 and we're kind of like, what? But culturally speaking, there are some parts of the world where that isn't all that uncommon. It's becoming more and more less common. That makes sense. Less common in these 21st century times, but it's still a reality. And then out there to 49. So again, we focus on one area. Could be a country, could be a region, could be just one state. And we look at, how many children are being born. Again, another one of those areas that Hans was focusing in on when he was looking at Bangladesh and talking about, what did their total fertility rate used to look like? What's it looking like now? And talking about some of these parts of the world where, you go back just 50 years ago, it was averaging like 5 children per family or per woman. And now we're getting down to, 2.3, that kind of thing. All right. And yeah, there are a lot of different factors that come into play in determining TFR. This is where we really, really do focus in on the impact and the influence of culture, the expectations of women in some different parts of the world, whether women are seen as primarily as just being, that's their purpose, have babies, raise family, while the husband is out working. And so some of it has to do with those gender roles, and some of it has to do to everything from, access to birth control, education, poverty, so many different impacts that all come, flying in together. And yeah, tying in with what Hans was talking about is that we have seen that TFR, just kind of dropping and dropping and dropping. It wasn't that many. We go 200 years ago, and even here in parts of the American colonies, they talk about seven children, 8 children was very common. Which you needed because they were working on the farm. They were kind of like the free labor, just like you that take care of your chores at home. You're free labor, but TFR. Reality is it has gone down. All right, can he take care of an entire slide in 2 minutes? I doubt it, but let's see what happens here. All right, so that big explosion we talk about that happens about 1800. Industrial Revolution. All right. Some of you maybe have learned about the Industrial Revolution before. If not, you're going to get a dose of it before you get finished with APHUG, and then you'll get even more of it if you take AP World History next year. Okay. I keep plugging it. There's a reason. But we do see this with the rise of industrialized factories, the more the use of machinery than human labor. That is where we start to see the number of children per woman beginning to decrease, life expectancy beginning to increase. We see a lot of these kind of improvements as we start moving into more and more of the modern world. Okay, and impacts of that have been the way that we have seen women change their roles in societies here in the United States and all over the world. With the Industrial Revolution, you start to see more and more people abandoning, cottage industries, working out of the home, and changing those in for factory jobs, and women just as much as men. Okay, it's kind of slowly at first. But as you go through the 1800s into the 1900s, more and more women working outside of the home. Some of them a choice because they want to pursue a career of their own. Sometimes it's out of economic necessity, where for a family to be able to make ends meet, both husband and wife need to work, whether there's kids in the house or not. Okay. And there's definitely a strong connection between, if we look at countries around the world and we look at the amount of educational opportunity that is offered to women, where there is more opportunity, are fewer children. As women see, other possibilities that they have in front of them and what they can do with their lives, it doesn't mean that they abandon motherhood. It just means that they usually are going to be having fewer children. They're only going to have 2 kids. Some of them are going to choose to only have 1 child, that sort of thing. And so that is almost kind of like a rule you can count on, right? And then again, another one of those topics that was touched on in Don't Panic, and the access, or the impact that access to contraception, things like that, have had. And we can also throw in the mix, when I mentioned their religion having its impact in there. You know, um, you think about, for those of you who, like me, practice the Catholic faith. There's rules in there when it comes to contraception. That has had some impact and kind of creates a little bit of push pull sometimes when it comes to the whole concept of family planning, depending on what the religious beliefs are. Okay, and then where I'll get down here to the bottom. Um, we'll just this one. We talked about it already in terms of just a straight up definition, and anti-natalist policies are just that. It's when the government steps in to and enacts policies, laws, basically, to try to slow down childbirth rates. And usually, what I've got there for number one, that's usually what powers it, is that there is a real fear of overpopulation and the potential for not enough jobs, creating economic havoc, not enough food. So you have health issues, famine, that sort of thing. Okay. When we jump back into this together in class, we will take a look at what I've already mentioned to you before. We'll look at the example of the one-child policy in China, probably the classic example of an anti-natalist policy, and also show you the dangers that come with anti-natalist policies. We'll be kind of folded right into that. But I am at 32 minutes. I tell you, well, it's all about goals. I had a goal. I came close. Anyhow, you have all of this. Well, we'll pick it up from there when we're back together in class. Thanks for hanging with me on all this, like you had a choice. But hey, I can see you all smiling anyhow. All right. All right. Have a good one. See you next time. Bye.